Can you imagine Lewis Hamilton doubting his continuity in full season? Well, that was exactly what happened after the Hungary GP. What is really happening in Ferrari so that the 7-time world champion launched such a devastating bomb? Stay, because this goes far beyond a simple bad career. The 2025 Hungary Grand Prix will be marked as one of the darkest episodes in the Lewis Hamilton stage with Ferrari. What began as a disappointing day in classification resulted in an unprecedented emotional explosion in the professional career of the 7-time world champion. Since he arrived in Maranello, Hamilton had maintained a prudent, measured profile, and with statements loaded with hope. But Hungary broke it, not only as a pilot, but also as an iconic figure that represents professionalism, temper, and control. After a classification in which he was completely lost, without rhythm, without confidence in the SF25, Hamilton ended in 12th, almost a second from the time of his own teammate, Charles Leclerc, who achieved pole. But what really unleashed the storm was his direct comment on radio: "I am useless, absolutely useless. The team has no problems, they can see that the car is in pole. They probably need to change pilot." That phrase, brutally sincere and emotional, was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, a self-tank that reflected its level of personal frustration, but on the other, an implicit criticism of the disconnection between him and the team. And while many thought that after the race the British would correct the course of his words, the opposite happened. When crossing the checkered flag in the same 12th position, without having been able to advance throughout the GP, it was approached again by the press. This time his tone was even more bleak. "When you have a feeling, you have it. There are many things going in the background that are not well." This phrase was interpreted by many as a direct reference to internal problems within the team, management disputes, questionable strategic decisions, or even tensions with their own career engineer. The truth is that he opened a huge crack among Ferrari's public narrative, that of a team that has evolved, and the personal experience of his star pilot. The most alarming moment came minutes later, when he was consulted on his participation in the next Grand Prix after the summer break. His answer was as ambiguous as overwhelming: "I hope to return. Hopefully he is back, yes." That phrase was a true earthquake in the paddock. No one hoped that Hamilton, a competitor recognized for his ethics, his constancy, and his delivery, even questioned his future presence. Not because it was believed infallible, but because it showed an unprecedented loss of motivation. The cameras captured more than their words. He was seen with his face dejected, sitting for minutes in the back of the garage, silently observing the data screens. His body language was that of someone completely disconnected from the present, thinking of alternative scenarios. For a pilot like Hamilton, accustomed to fighting for titles, for podiums, for will battles, being trapped in a machinery that does not respond, that limits it, that frustrates it, is devastating. But this is not just a history of overwhelmed emotions. It is a symptom of something much deeper. Hungary was the breakdown, the moment where Hamilton stopped hiding. He stopped selling optimism. He stopped protecting the team. It was the moment he decided to shout what had been accumulating from the preseason tests: "Ferrari is not up to it." And he knows better than anyone. On the surface, Ferrari SF25 is a competitive car. On timesheets, sometimes even brilliant. It has proven to be able to achieve poles, maintain rhythm in short batches, and stand up to teams such as McLaren and Red Bull. But behind that apparent performance, a structural defect is hidden that completely conditions its real performance in the race: the filming height. More specifically, a problem of excessive wear of the plank, the wooden table under the chassis that regulates the legality of the car with the ground. This phenomenon, known as plank wear, became the Ferrari Achilles heel from the first races of the year. The most critical point was in the Chinese Grand Prix, where both cars, Hamilton and Leclerc, were disqualified after the race for violating the technical regulations. The reason: wear beyond the limit allowed at the bottom of the car. But what seemed like an isolated incident was revealed as a chronic problem that forced the team to completely rethink the configuration of the car. From that moment on, Ferrari was forced to increase the height of the car to avoid more sanctions. And this is where the real punishment for the pilots begins. In the current Formula One, the aerodynamic efficiency of the flat background, especially with soil effect, is vital. The closer to the soil the car rolls, the more aerodynamic load generates and faster can go in curve. But if the car rises to avoid wear, that load is lost. The car becomes unstable, inconsistent, and difficult to pilot. Exactly what is happening to Hamilton. British's frustration is not a product of a bad adaptation. It is a direct consequence of having to pilot a car that your potential cannot be extracted. Every time you want to attack a vertex, the backflow rates. Every time he tries to stop soon or train early, the car becomes unpredictable. The SF25 has a limited performance mapped by a condition that cannot be solved with simple adjustments. The drama is greater because the car is not slow in its base. In simulations, in wind tunnel, even in classification sessions with an aggressive configuration, Ferrari has shown that it can be in front. But that aggressive configuration is, in practice, illegal or unsustainable in complete career conditions. And the most ironic of all is that the same performance that illustrates on Saturday becomes a trap on Sunday, when the car has to roll with load, temperature, and real wear. This has caused an internal dilemma impossible to ignore. Ferrari is trapped in a paradox. It has designed a fast paper on paper, but that cannot be fully used on the track without taking risks. The SF25 can be competitive for 5 laps, but not for 50. It can go to the limit on a classification lap, but not in a complete career strategy. There is no margin of tactical maneuver, there is no versatility in pit stop decisions. And that, in the modern F1, is a sentence. For Hamilton, this is a silent hell. Because he cannot directly blame the car without creating an institutional conflict. He cannot point to his engineers without breaking the internal cohesion of the equipment. And it cannot remain silent while your reputation erodes career after career. That is why his emotional explosion in Hungary was so significant. It was the first time he broke that covenant of silence. Behind the message, "I am useless," there was a not said reality, "The car limits me." And the most worrying thing is that Ferrari seems not to have an immediate solution. Alternative settings barely serve to mitigate damage. The simulations do not offer answers without completely compromising the rhythm. And the worst, any attempt to return to the optimal performance level of the SF25 implies dangerously approaching the margins of the technical regulations, which cost them 2 disqualifications. In that context, Hamilton's moral is eroded day after day. It is not that he does not know how to pilot. You can't use your talent freely. And in a sport where thousands of seconds make the difference, piloting limited is the most humiliating thing that can happen to a world champion. After weeks of accumulated frustration, strategic errors, technical sanctions, and explosive statements by Lewis Hamilton, Ferrari knew that he could not afford to continue improvising. The most historical team of Formula One was under pressure, not only from the inside, but also from the outside. The Italian press began to demand answers, the fans manifested their disenchantment, and within the paddock the perception was clear. If Ferrari did not react at that time, 2025 would be another lost year. It was then that Frédéric Vasseur, team director, made a risky decision. A high-risk technical commitment that became the last cartridge available to try to save the project. A radical update in the Belgium Grand Prix. On a technical level, this update represented the closure of a stage. It was the end point of the development of SF25. From that moment on, all the resources of the team would be redirected to the 2026 project, in preparation for the new technical regulation that will completely change aerodynamic and motorization philosophy. Vasseur was blunt. There will be no more significant development packages in 2025. Or this suspension worked, or the team was condemned to survive with a car that had already proven inconsistent. Implementing this update on a sprint format weekend, as was Spa, was a bold play. Normally, the teams avoid introducing critical pieces in this type of event due to the limited time of practice and reduced margin for adjustments. But Ferrari had no choice. Vasseur clearly explained it to the later press conference. It is never ideal to bring a great evolution in a sprint, but we could not continue waiting. Spa was the time. Initially, the results were not as hopeful as expected. Charles Leclerc, although more comfortable with the new geometry, continued complaining about lack of traction in slow curves. Lewis Hamilton, on the other hand, noticed a slight improvement in braking stability and rear axle behavior, but insisted that the car was still very difficult to lead to the limit. The aerodynamic load lost by the height was still present, and the new suspension, although it resolved part of the problem, did not completely eliminate the structural commitment. What this update did offer was greater predictability. Before, the SF25 was an unpredictable car, which varied its behavior according to the track conditions, the side wind, or even the type of rubber used. With the new suspension, at least, the pilots could better understand the reactions of the car and plan their attacks or defenses with more confidence. But that, in the competitive universe of Formula One, is not enough to fight for championships. The SF25 with its revised suspension is, in essence, a transition car. A machine that reflects Ferrari's desperate effort for containing a technical and narrative collapse. It is not the car they promised. It is not the car that Hamilton expected. And the worst, It is not the car that can meet Maranello's expectations before the great change of 2026. Ferrari has tried to react. He has invested in development, has changed his technical philosophy with the new rear suspension, has tried to adapt the car in the style of Hamilton. But the damage is already done. The relationship between pilot and car is worn. The confidence of the pilot eroded, and the environment within the team tense. And now I want to listen to you. Do you think Hamilton will make a radical decision if the situation does not improve after the summer stop? Leave me your opinion.